This morning, your soulmate brings a gift so special, it will leave you speechless. Stay with me and don't rush this, because what you're about to read isn't about a physical gift wrapped in paper or tied with a ribbon. It's about a moment that arrives quietly, early in the day, when your heart is still half asleep and your defenses aren't fully up yet. This morning is different, and you feel it before you can explain it. The air feels softer. Time feels slower. And somewhere in that stillness, your soulmate shows up in a way you never expected. You wake up thinking it's just another morning. Same light through the window. Same routine waiting for you. But something inside you feels slightly off, like your body knows something meaningful is about to happen before your mind catches up. You try to ignore it at first, telling yourself not to read into things, not to hope too much. You've done that before, and you remember how that felt. But this time, the feeling doesn't come from anxiety. It comes from calm. This gift doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't try to impress. In fact, at first, you might almost miss it. It arrives through presence. Through intention. Through a choice your soulmate makes that morning that has nothing to do with convenience and everything to do with you. Your soulmate has been thinking about this moment longer than you realize. Not in a dramatic, obsessive way, but in a thoughtful one. In the quiet hours when they asked themselves what you truly needed, not what looked good from the outside. They thought about your past. About the weight you carry quietly. About the ways you show up for others without always being met the same way. And instead of giving you something flashy, they chose something meaningful. The gift might come in the form of words you've been waiting to hear for a long time. Words that aren't rushed. Words that aren't half said. Words that land fully and honestly. Maybe it's an apology that finally takes responsibility without excuses. Maybe it's a confession that was held back out of fear until now. Maybe it's a promise, not about forever, but about effort, presence, and choosing you intentionally. When they speak, you notice something immediately. There's no defensiveness. No rehearsed tone. No need to convince you. They're grounded. Present. Vulnerable in a way that feels real, not performative. And that's when it hits you, this isn't about fixing the past. It's about honoring the present. You may feel your throat tighten. Not because you're sad, but because you're finally being seen. Truly seen. In a way that reaches the parts of you that learn to stay quiet, to not ask for too much, to be patient even when patience hurt. This gift touches a place in you that words rarely reach. What makes it overwhelming isn't the size of the gesture. It's the accuracy. The way it meets you exactly where you are. As if they finally understood something about you that you never knew how to explain. As if they listened not just to what you said, but to what you lived. This morning, your soulmate doesn't rush away afterward. They don't say their piece and disappear. They stay. They sit with the silence that follows. They let you feel whatever comes up without trying to manage it for you. That alone feels like a gift, because you're used to carrying your emotions alone. You might find yourself struggling to respond at first. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because the moment deserves to breathe. You realize how rare it is for someone to give without expecting immediate reassurance in return. To offer something meaningful and trust that you'll receive it in your own time. As the morning unfolds, you notice how everything feels slightly different. Colors seem warmer. Sounds feel less sharp. Even the ordinary parts of the day carry a quiet significance now. It's as if something heavy inside you has been gently set down, even if only partially. This gift also brings clarity. Not answers to every question, but enough truth to steady you. Enough honesty to remind you that love doesn't have to be confusing to be deep. That care doesn't have to hurt to be real. That effort, when it's genuine, feels grounding instead of exhausting. You may realize that this gift couldn't have come earlier. That if it had, you might not have been ready to receive it. You needed the growth. The waiting. The lessons that taught you your worth. Your soulmate needed that time too, whether you knew it or not. This morning happens because both of you have reached a place where truth feels safer than silence. There's also a tenderness in how they give this gift. No pressure. No expectations. They're not asking you to forget the past or rush into the future. They're simply offering something real and letting you decide how it fits into your life. That respect feels just as powerful as the gift itself. You might notice tears come to your eyes unexpectedly. Not dramatic tears, but quiet ones. The kind that show up when your heart finally relaxes after being guarded for too long. You're not crying because you're overwhelmed, you're crying because you're relieved. Relieved that you didn't imagine the connection. Relieved that your patience wasn't meaningless. Relieved that someone finally met you with the same depth you've always offered. This morning becomes a marker in your life. Not because everything is suddenly perfect, but because something true was exchanged. Something that can't be taken back. Something that shifts how you see yourself and how you see them. You start to understand that the most special gifts aren't objects or grand gestures. They're moments of alignment. Moments when two people meet each other honestly, without armor. Moments when love feels safe enough to be spoken clearly. As the day goes on, you carry this feeling with you. Not excitement that makes you restless, but warmth that settles into your chest. You don't need to tell anyone about it right away. Some things feel too personal, too sacred to explain. You just know that something important happened this morning. Your soulmate didn't just give you a gift. They gave you reassurance. They gave you presence. They gave you truth. And the reason it leaves you speechless isn't because you don't have words. It's because, for once, words aren't necessary. You feel it. Deeply. Clearly. Calmly. This morning isn't the end of your story. It's not even the climax. It's a quiet turning point. One that reminds you that love, when it's real, shows up not to impress you, but to understand you. And that understanding stays with you long after the morning passes. Stay with me a little longer, because what follows that morning gift is just as powerful as the moment itself. What happens after you receive something that honest, that intentional, is never loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It settles slowly. It rearranges things inside you without asking for permission. After your soulmate leaves, or even if they stay a little longer, you notice a shift in how you breathe. Your shoulders aren't as tense. Your thoughts aren't racing ahead or spiraling backward. For once, you're fully in the present moment, and it feels unfamiliar in the best way. You didn't realize how much of your life had been lived in emotional anticipation until it suddenly stopped. You replay their words, not obsessively, but carefully. Each sentence lands again with new meaning. You realize they didn't say anything extra. They didn't exaggerate. They didn't promise things they couldn't stand behind. Everything they offered was measured, grounded, and true. That's why it hit you so deeply. It wasn't fantasy. It was reality finally meeting you where you stand. As the hours pass, you begin to understand something important. This gift wasn't meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to steady you. It wasn't designed to sweep you off your feet, but to help you feel like you're standing firmly on them again. That's why it feels different from past gestures, different from past apologies, different from past declarations of love. You think back to other times someone gave you something and called it love. How often those moments came with conditions. With expectations. With an unspoken request for you to respond in a certain way or feel a certain thing immediately. This time, there's none of that. Your soulmate didn't give you this gift to control the outcome. They gave it because it was true. That realization alone is emotional. You may feel a strange mix of emotions rising. Gratitude, relief, vulnerability, even a little fear. Not fear of them, but fear of how much this moment matters. When something touches you this deeply, it reminds you how open you still are, even after everything you've been through. And that openness can feel scary when you've learned to protect yourself. But instead of shutting down, you stay with the feeling. You let it move through you. You let yourself acknowledge how long you've waited for something this sincere, even if you never admitted it out loud. You realize that part of you had stopped expecting to be met like this. Not because you didn't deserve it, but because disappointment taught you to lower your expectations. This gift gently lifts those expectations back to where they belong. Throughout the day, you notice small things hitting differently. A song you've heard 100 times suddenly feels personal. A quiet moment feels full instead of empty. You catch yourself smiling without realizing why. These aren't dramatic changes, but they're real. Something inside you has softened. You may also notice that your inner dialogue changes. You're not questioning your worth. You're not replaying old insecurities. You're not wondering what you did wrong or what you need to fix next. For once, there's nothing to fix. You were met. And being met removes the constant urge to prove. That's when another layer of the gift reveals itself. It restores your sense of safety. Emotional safety. The kind that allows you to be honest with yourself. The kind that lets you rest instead of constantly scanning for disappointment. You might think about responding to your soulmate later that day. Maybe you draft a message in your head. Maybe you start to write something and stop. Not because you don't care, but because you want your response to be as real as what they gave you. You don't want to rush it. And for the first time, you trust that you don't have to. You realize something else too. This gift didn't just acknowledge your past pain, it respected it. They didn't minimize what you went through. They didn't tell you to move on or let it go. They showed you that they understood why you became the way you did. Why you learned to be careful. Why you learned to be quiet. Why you learned to carry so much on your own. And instead of asking you to change that overnight, they met you there. That's rare. As evening approaches, the weight of the day doesn't feel as heavy as it usually does. You're tired, but not drained. Reflective, but not lost. There's a groundedness inside you that wasn't there before. Not because all your questions have been answered, but because one important one finally was, does someone see me? Yes. They do. This doesn't mean everything is suddenly resolved. It doesn't mean the future is guaranteed. But it means something essential has shifted. You're no longer guessing where you stand in their heart. You're no longer filling in silence with fear. You're no longer questioning whether your feelings were imagined. You were right to feel what you felt. You were right to wait. You were right to protect yourself until something real arrived. Later that night, you might find yourself reflecting on how differently this love feels compared to the ones that hurt you. Those loves asked you to tolerate confusion. This one offers clarity. Those loves made you anxious. This one makes you calm. Those loves made you feel like you were too much. This one makes you feel like you're finally enough. And the most surprising part? This love doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel like something you might lose if you don't hold on to it tightly. It feels like something that will stay because it wants to, not because you're clinging to it. That realization allows you to relax in a way you haven't in years. You fall asleep that night differently too. Your mind doesn't race. Your heart isn't heavy. There's a quiet contentment there, even if there's still uncertainty. You don't need answers tonight. You don't need reassurance. You already received what you needed this morning. And as sleep comes, you understand why this gift left you speechless. Because some things don't need to be explained. Some things don't need to be analyzed. Some things are simply meant to be felt. This wasn't just a gift from your soulmate. It was a reminder of who you are when you're truly seen. And that reminder stays with you, long after the day ends. Stay with me in this moment, because what unfolds after that day is not loud or dramatic, but it is deeply transformative. It doesn't announce itself with big changes on the outside. Instead, it works quietly, from the inside out, touching parts of you that haven't felt safe enough to relax in a long time. The morning gift lingers with you in subtle ways. It follows you through ordinary moments. While you're doing routine things. Washing dishes, answering messages, walking through familiar streets, you feel a softness underneath everything. It's not excitement. It's not anticipation. It's a sense of being grounded, as if something inside you finally found a place to rest. You start noticing how different your emotional reactions are now. Situations that once would have triggered overthinking don't pull you under anymore. When silence happens, you don't immediately assume the worst. When plans change, you don't take it as a sign of disinterest. There's a quiet trust forming, not just in your soulmate, but in yourself. That's one of the biggest shifts. Before, trust felt like something you gave to others and hoped they wouldn't misuse. Now, trust feels internal. You trust your ability to read situations clearly. You trust that you'll speak up if something feels off. You trust that you won't abandon yourself to keep a connection alive. This new trust changes the way you show up. When you talk to your soulmate again, you're not guarded, but you're also not overexposed. You're honest without spilling everything all at once. You share how the gift made you feel, but you don't rush to define what it means for the future. And what surprises you is how comfortable that feels. You're not trying to lock anything in. You're letting things unfold naturally. They respond in the same way they gave the gift, with presence, not pressure. They don't push for more than you're ready to offer. They don't pull away when you take your time. They meet you where you are, again and again. That consistency builds something stronger than words. You begin to see them differently now. Not as someone you're hoping will choose you, but as someone who already has. Not in a possessive way. In an intentional way. Their actions match their words. Their energy stays steady. They don't disappear when things get quiet or complicated. This steadiness does something unexpected. It brings up old emotions you thought you had already dealt with. Moments when you were left waiting. Times when your needs were minimized. Relationships where love felt conditional. Those memories surface not to hurt you, but to be released. You realize how much you normalized uncertainty in the past. How often you convinced yourself that anxiety was passion, that inconsistency was depth, that waiting was devotion. Now, standing in something calmer, you can finally see how heavy that was. And you let it go. There are moments when you feel emotional without knowing exactly why. Not sad, not overwhelmed, just full. Your chest feels tight sometimes, your eyes sting unexpectedly. It's your nervous system recalibrating. It's learning that closeness doesn't always end in pain. That being seen doesn't automatically lead to loss. You don't try to suppress these moments. You let them pass. You're gentle with yourself in a way you weren't before. As days go by, you notice how this connection doesn't demand all your attention. You still enjoy your solitude. You still focus on your work, your interests, your inner world. And instead of feeling threatened by that independence, your soulmate encourages it. They don't need to be your entire universe. They want to be part of it. That makes you feel respected. You also notice how conversations deepen naturally. Not because either of you is pushing for vulnerability, but because it feels safe to go there. You talk about fears without feeling exposed. You talk about hopes without feeling foolish. You talk about boundaries without feeling guilty. There's an honesty between you that doesn't feel heavy. It feels clean. One evening, maybe while you're sitting alone or lying in bed, you realize something quietly profound. You're not bracing for disappointment anymore. You're not waiting for the moment things fall apart. You're not scanning for signs that this was all temporary. You're present. And presence, after years of emotional turbulence, feels like a gift in itself. You might still have moments of doubt. Old habits don't disappear overnight. A part of you may whisper, "Don't get too comfortable." But that voice doesn't control you anymore. You listen to it, acknowledge it, and choose differently. You remind yourself that comfort doesn't mean complacency. It means safety. As your connection continues, you start to feel more aligned in other areas of your life. Decisions feel clearer. You're less reactive. You don't feel the need to rush outcomes. You're okay with things taking time. Time no longer feels like an enemy. You also realize that this gift didn't just come from your soulmate. It came from the version of you who survived disappointment without becoming bitter. The version of you who kept your heart open but learned when to protect it. The version of you who waited, not passively, but intentionally. You honor that version of yourself now. There's a night when you talk with your soulmate about the future, not in big promises, but in shared values. You talk about what matters. About how you handle conflict. About what love means to each of you. These conversations don't feel scary. They feel grounding. You're not afraid of asking questions anymore. You're not afraid of the answers. And that's when it becomes clear why this gift mattered so much. It wasn't meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to realign you. To bring you back to yourself while inviting someone else in. You feel stronger now, not because you've built walls, but because you've built boundaries. Not because you need less love, but because you no longer accept love that costs you your peace. This connection doesn't ask you to prove your worth. It reflects it. As weeks continue to pass, the memory of that morning doesn't fade. It evolves. It becomes a foundation instead of a moment. Something you return to when you need reassurance, not because you doubt what's happening, but because it reminds you of how it began, with intention, honesty, and care. You understand now that the most special gifts aren't things you can hold. They're experiences that change how you feel about yourself. Experiences that remind you that you are worthy of being met fully, without confusion or delay. This gift didn't make you speechless forever. It gave you your voice back, calmer, clearer, and more confident than before. And as you move forward, you carry that with you. Not as hope. Not as expectation. But as truth. A truth that stays. Stay here with me, because what unfolds now is not about momentum or excitement anymore. It's about depth. It's about what happens when something meaningful doesn't fade, doesn't rush, and doesn't ask you to become someone else to keep it alive. This is where the gift your soulmate brought that morning becomes something you live with, not something you just remember. Days pass, and you start to realize that the biggest change didn't happen between you and them. It happened inside you. The way you wake up feels different. Not because every day is suddenly happy, but because there's less heaviness waiting for you. You're no longer waking up with that quiet question in your chest, am I enough, am I chosen, am I safe here? That question has softened, not because life answered it loudly, but because it was answered gently and consistently. You notice how you move through conversations now. You're not measuring your words. You're not editing yourself to sound easier, calmer, less intense. You speak honestly, and when you pause, it's because you're thinking, not because you're afraid. That's new. For so long, you learned to make yourself smaller to protect connections. Now, you don't feel the need to do that anymore. Your soulmate sees this change in you too. They don't comment on it directly, but you can feel it in the way they respond. They don't flinch when you express something vulnerable. They don't pull away when you need reassurance. They don't take your honesty as a burden. Instead, they meet it with steadiness. And that steadiness continues to surprise you, not because you doubt them, but because you're still learning what consistency feels like. There are moments when you catch yourself waiting for something to go wrong. A delayed reply. A shift in tone. A day that feels quieter than usual. Old instincts don't disappear overnight. But what's different now is that those moments don't send you spiraling. You notice them, you feel the flicker of fear, and then you pause. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't assume abandonment. You give space for reality to show you what's actually happening. Most of the time, reality meets you with reassurance. You begin to understand how much of your past pain came from not knowing where you stood. From loving in uncertainty. from hoping instead of being met. This connection doesn't remove all uncertainty, nothing real ever does. But it removes the kind that eats away at you. You're not guessing at intention. You're not decoding silence. You're not filling gaps with fear. That alone gives you peace you didn't know you were missing. You also start to notice how your emotional energy is returning to you. You're less drained at the end of the day. You have more patience with yourself. More kindness for your own limits. You're not spending hours replaying conversations or imagining worst-case scenarios. Your mind feels quieter, not empty, just calmer. This calm allows you to reflect on your past in a different way. Not with regret, but with clarity. You see how much you endured in the name of love before. How often you stayed silent when something hurt because you didn't want to rock the boat. How many times you waited, hoping someone would eventually show up the way you needed. You don't judge yourself for that anymore. You understand now that you were doing the best you could with the tools you had. And you honor that version of yourself instead of criticizing it. One evening, maybe during a simple moment, sitting together, or even just texting back and forth, you feel something click. Not fireworks. Not certainty about the rest of your life. Just a quiet realization that you don't feel alone in the way you used to, even when you're by yourself. That realization is powerful. It means you're no longer relying on someone else to validate your worth. You're sharing space with someone who recognizes it. And there's a difference between those two things that changes everything. As your connection deepens, you begin to see your soulmate more clearly too. Not as an ideal, not as a savior, but as a real person. Someone with flaws, habits, moods, and limits. And instead of that clarity making you pull back, it makes you feel safer. Because real people are predictable in a way ideals never are. You see how they handle stress. How they admit when they're wrong. How they don't deflect responsibility. How they show care not just when it's easy, but when it requires effort. These moments don't feel dramatic, but they build trust brick by brick. You also notice how they give you space without withdrawing. They don't disappear when you need time to yourself. They don't make you feel guilty for having your own world. They respect your independence because they're secure in their place beside you. That security is contagious. You find yourself becoming more secure too. You don't cling. You don't test. You don't need constant reassurance. You trust the connection because it's proven itself quietly, over time. And when doubts arise, you talk about them. Not in a confrontational way, but in a human one. Those conversations feel different from anything you've known before. There's no power struggle. No fear of being too much. No punishment for honesty. You're listened to. And when they speak, you listen too. There's mutual care in how you handle each other's hearts. You realize that love doesn't have to be intense to be deep. It doesn't have to hurt to be meaningful. It doesn't have to feel like a constant test. Sometimes love feels like being understood without having to explain yourself over and over again. That understanding creates room for joy in small things. Shared laughter. Comfortable silence. The way your days begin to overlap naturally. You don't force togetherness. It just happens. You also feel a growing sense of confidence in yourself. Not because you're in a relationship, but because you're in alignment. You're no longer compromising your values to keep someone close. You're no longer negotiating your needs. You're choosing from a place of self-respect, not fear. This confidence shows up everywhere. In how you speak. In how you carry yourself. In how you make decisions. Love isn't distracting you from your life, it's supporting you as you live it. There are moments when you think back to that morning again. The gift. The way it landed. And you realize it wasn't just about what was given. It was about timing. About readiness. About two people finally being able to meet each other honestly without projection or pretense. You weren't ready for this before. And neither were they. That doesn't make the waiting meaningless. It makes it necessary. You understand now that love isn't about being found when you're empty. It's about being met when you're whole enough to recognize what's good for you. This connection didn't arrive to fill a void. It arrived to walk beside you as you continue becoming yourself. And because of that, it feels sustainable. There are still challenges ahead. You know that. Life doesn't stop being complicated just because love feels right. But the difference now is that you don't face those challenges alone emotionally. You have someone who doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. Someone who stays present even when there are no easy answers. That presence is the real gift. You don't feel the need to rush the future. You don't need guarantees. You don't need promises carved in stone. You trust the process because you trust how this connection makes you feel, calm, respected, grounded, seen. And most importantly, you trust yourself. You trust that if something changes, you'll handle it. You trust that you won't lose yourself again. You trust that love doesn't require self-erasure. And that trust frees you to love without fear. This stage isn't flashy. It won't make for dramatic stories. But it will make for a life that feels steady and real. A life where love isn't something you chase or question, but something you participate in consciously. The gift from that morning continues to unfold, not as a moment frozen in time, but as a foundation you build on every day. A foundation made of honesty, presence, and mutual care. And when you look at yourself now, you barely recognize the version of you who once wondered if they were asking for too much. You weren't asking for too much. You were waiting for the right person to meet you where you already were. And now, finally, you are there together. Stay with this, because what unfolds now isn't a dramatic turn or a sudden declaration. It's the slow, honest realization that something real has taken root, and that reality changes how you carry yourself, how you love, and how you understand what connection truly means. You start noticing it in the smallest moments. The way your chest doesn't tighten when plans are uncertain. The way you don't feel the urge to rehearse conversations before they happen. The way your thoughts don't spiral late at night, searching for hidden meanings. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in fragments, quietly stitching itself into your daily life until one day you realize it's there to stay. You no longer wake up wondering where you stand. That question used to sit heavy in your body, especially in relationships. Now it barely whispers. Not because you've been given guarantees, but because you've been given consistency. And consistency, over time, speaks louder than reassurance ever could. There's a softness in you now that feels earned, not naive. You're open without being unprotected. Vulnerable without being exposed. You've learned the difference, and that knowledge lives in your body, not just your mind. Your soulmate notices this too. They notice how you don't flinch at closeness anymore. How you don't pull away when something feels good. How you don't test them to see if they'll stay. You don't need to. Staying has become their default, not something you have to negotiate for. There's a moment, maybe during a quiet evening or a simple exchange, when you realize you're no longer bracing for disappointment. That old habit had been so ingrained that you didn't even know you were doing it. You'd learned to expect loss, to prepare for endings before beginnings had a chance to breathe. Now, that habit loosens its grip. You don't feel foolish for hoping anymore. Hope feels grounded now. It's not built on fantasy or urgency. It's built on what's actually happening. On shared effort. On honest communication. On respect that doesn't waver when things get uncomfortable. You start to trust that you can be fully yourself here. Not the curated version. Not the overly accommodating version. The real one. The one who has moods. The one who needs space sometimes. The one who asks questions. The one who feels deeply. And instead of that being too much, it's met with care. That changes something fundamental inside you. You begin to understand that love isn't meant to keep you in a constant state of alert. It's meant to support your nervous system, not hijack it. This connection doesn't exhaust you. It nourishes you. It doesn't distract you from your life. It integrates into it. You're still independent. You still have your own world. And instead of threatening the connection, that independence strengthens it. You don't need each other out of fear. You choose each other out of desire and respect. That choice is powerful. There are moments when you reflect on how long it took to get here. The waiting. The loneliness. The lessons that felt cruel at the time. And instead of feeling resentful, you feel grateful. Grateful that you didn't settle. Grateful that you didn't force something that wasn't aligned. Grateful that you learned how to walk away when staying meant losing yourself. Those experiences shaped you into someone capable of receiving this kind of love without sabotaging it. You also see your soulmate more clearly now. You see their effort, not as grand gestures, but as steady presence. You see how they show up even when they're tired. How they listen even when it's inconvenient. How they take responsibility instead of deflecting. These things matter deeply to you because you know how rare they are. You don't idealize them. You don't need to. You accept their humanity, their flaws, their learning curve. And because acceptance goes both ways, the connection feels safe enough to grow without pretense. There's a sense of mutual care that develops. You look out for each other without keeping score. You adjust when needed without resentment. You communicate before misunderstandings harden into distance. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means everything is addressed. You're no longer afraid of conflict. You understand now that conflict handled with respect deepens intimacy. You've seen how repair builds trust. How honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, creates closeness instead of separation. That understanding gives you confidence. You don't fear losing this connection the way you once feared losing love. Because you know that even if circumstances were to change someday, you wouldn't lose yourself again. You've built something solid inside you. You trust your ability to cope, to choose, to walk away if necessary. That self-trust doesn't weaken love. It makes it freer. There's a quiet joy that begins to show up in ordinary days. Not excitement that demands attention, but contentment that settles into your bones. You laugh more easily. You feel lighter. You notice beauty in things you used to rush past. Love isn't consuming you. It's grounding you. You also notice how your boundaries feel clearer now. You don't hesitate to express needs. You don't feel guilty for taking space. You don't compromise your values to keep the peace. And because those boundaries are respected, you don't need to defend them constantly. This mutual respect becomes the backbone of the connection. You might still have moments of vulnerability. Moments when fear resurfaces quietly. But those moments don't control your behavior anymore. You acknowledge them. You communicate when needed. You don't retreat into silence or over-explain to be understood. You trust that understanding is possible here. As time continues, the memory of that morning gift doesn't fade. It transforms. It becomes less about what was said and more about what it set in motion. A shift toward honesty. A willingness to show up fully. A reminder that you are worthy of being met with intention. That gift didn't just change the dynamic between you and your soulmate. It changed your relationship with yourself. You no longer question whether you deserve this kind of care. You no longer wonder if you're asking for too much. You know now that you were never asking for too much, you were asking the wrong people. This realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you discerning. You choose with clarity now. You stay present. You invest where effort is mutual. You walk away from what doesn't align without needing closure that never comes. And because of that, love feels sustainable. You don't rush the future. You don't cling to the present. You allow things to unfold at a pace that feels respectful to both of you. There's no pressure to prove anything. No need to rush milestones. You're building something real, not performing something ideal. There's peace in that. One day, you may look back at this phase and realize it was the moment everything truly changed, not because of a grand event, but because you finally felt safe enough to stay open. Safe enough to be seen. Safe enough to love without fear of losing yourself. That safety is the greatest gift of all. And it continues to grow, quietly, steadily, through everyday choices. Through showing up. Through listening. Through choosing each other again and again, not out of obligation, but out of care. You didn't just receive a gift that morning. You stepped into a way of loving that honors who you are. And that way of loving will carry you forward, no matter what comes next. Stay with me here, because what happens now is not about progression or milestones. It's about embodiment. About how love stops being something you talk about or think about and becomes something that quietly shapes the way you exist in the world. This stage doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for attention. It simply becomes visible through how you breathe, how you respond, how you rest. You begin to notice that your body feels safer. Not just emotionally, but physically. Your shoulders don't carry the same tension they once did. Your jaw isn't clenched by default. You're not bracing for impact in conversations. You're not preparing defenses before you even know if they're needed. That constant background anxiety you lived with for so long begins to fade, not because life is suddenly easy, but because love no longer feels like a threat. You didn't realize how much energy it took to love while being afraid. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being left. Afraid of wanting too much or saying the wrong thing. That fear shaped your posture, your tone, your silence. Now, slowly, that fear loosens its grip. You notice it in small ways. You speak without rehearsing. You pause without apologizing. You don't rush to fill silence. You don't feel the need to justify your emotions as they arise. You trust that they can exist without explanation. That trust didn't come from reassurance alone. It came from repeated experience. From watching your soulmate stay present even when things weren't smooth. From seeing them show up when it would have been easier to withdraw. From noticing that their care doesn't fluctuate based on your mood or convenience. Consistency changes people. You also notice how your internal world feels quieter now. Not empty, just calm. Thoughts still come, but they don't spiral. Emotions still rise, but they don't overwhelm. You feel them, acknowledge them, and let them pass. You're no longer fighting yourself to stay connected. This inner calm allows you to see more clearly. You see your soulmate not through longing or fear, but through presence. You see who they are when no one is watching. How they handle responsibility. How they treat themselves. How they speak about others. These observations don't make you anxious. They make you feel grounded. You realize that attraction has deepened into something more complex. It's not just desire anymore. It's respect. Admiration. Trust. A sense of partnership that doesn't need constant validation to exist. There's a moment when you recognize that you're no longer waiting for the next shoe to drop. That expectation of loss had been a quiet companion for so long that its absence feels strange at first. You keep checking for it, almost out of habit. But it doesn't arrive. Instead, what arrives is normalcy. The healthy kind. The kind that doesn't steal your attention, but supports your life. The kind that allows joy to exist without fear of punishment afterward. You start to enjoy love instead of managing it. That's a big shift. You also begin to notice how differently you respond to challenges now. When something difficult arises, externally or within the relationship, you don't collapse into self-doubt. You don't assume it's the beginning of the end. You approach it with curiosity and confidence. You trust that you can have hard conversations without losing connection. And when you do have those conversations, something important happens. You're heard. Not tolerated. Not dismissed. Heard. Your words are taken seriously. Your feelings are acknowledged. And when your soulmate speaks, you listen with the same care. This mutual respect becomes the anchor. You understand now that love isn't about constant harmony. It's about repair. It's about how quickly and sincerely two people can come back to each other after friction. This connection doesn't avoid discomfort. It navigates it. You feel safe enough to express boundaries without fear of abandonment. You feel safe enough to ask for space without fear of distance. You feel safe enough to lean in without fear of losing yourself. That safety doesn't make you dependent. It makes you stable. You still have your own life. Your own ambitions. Your own internal world. And instead of feeling separate from love, those things feel supported by it. You don't shrink your goals to make room for the relationship. You don't dim your light to avoid outshining someone else. You grow. And your soulmate grows alongside you. There's a quiet pride that develops, not ego, but appreciation. You're proud of how you show up now. Proud of the patience you've learned. Proud of the honesty you offer. Proud of the way you choose yourself without walking away from connection. You also feel proud of your soulmate, not because they're perfect, but because they try. Because they reflect. Because they care enough to adjust. Because they don't treat love as entitlement, but as responsibility. Responsibility changes everything. You may still have moments when the past knocks softly at the door. Old memories. Old hurts. Old fears. But those moments don't derail you. You acknowledge them, thank them for what they taught you, and let them pass. You don't live there anymore. Your present feels fuller than your past ever did. There's a sense of grounded joy that settles in. Not excitement that demands expression, but contentment that feels steady. You're not chasing highs. You're appreciating consistency. You're not searching for meaning. You're living it. You realize that love no longer feels like something you could lose overnight. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it's built on shared values, not fragile chemistry. It's built on effort, not fantasy. That realization allows you to relax in a way you never have before. You don't feel the need to define everything. You don't rush conversations about the future. You trust that what's being built will reveal itself in time. You're no longer afraid of time. Time isn't working against you anymore. It's working with you. You understand now why the gift that morning mattered so much. It wasn't just about what was said. It was about what it represented. A turning point. A moment when honesty replaced hesitation. When presence replaced guessing. When love stepped forward without being asked to perform. That gift continues to live through actions. Through daily choices. Through how you both show up when no one is watching. You didn't receive love that morning. You stepped into a way of loving that is sustainable, respectful, and real. And now, as you move forward, you don't feel the need to rush the next chapter. You're living inside it. Fully. Calmly. With both feet on the ground and your heart open. Whatever comes next. Growth, challenge, joy, uncertainty, you know you can meet it without losing yourself. You know how to love without disappearing. You know how to stay without settling. That knowledge stays with you. It shapes your choices. It steadies your heart. It reminds you who you are. And that is the deepest gift of all.
Hello everyone, stay with me until the very end because this closing is not about wrapping things up neatly. It's about landing somewhere true, somewhere quiet, somewhere that feels like yourself again. What you carry forward from all of this is not just a memory of morning or a gift or even a person. What you carry forward is a shift in how you exist in love. You are no longer appreciating it with your hands half closed, bracing up for less. You are no longer giving from a place of fear, hoping it will enough to make someone stay. You have learned something deeper than strategy or timing. you have learned because presence. There is calm confidence in you now that doesn't need to announce itself. You don't feel the argue that explain your worth or prove your depth. You know who you are because you have felt yourself reflected honestly without distortion. That reflection didn't inflate you, it grounded you. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe this channel, also comment, and thank you so much.